Our next speaker has been greatly anticipated, Warren Starnes. Now, Warren is working for a man named Ed Skilling, who was literally one of the first people I met in this movement, if you want to call this a movement. Ed Skilling was a master electronics builder. Back in 1983, when I met him, he was building what people were commonly calling Rife machines. And I noticed back then that his machines were way above the machines anybody else was building. And that was pretty cool. And I like Ed a lot. Now Ed is 92 years old, which tells me that there's something to his methods. And Warren Starnes has taken over as his main manager for the Skilling Institute. He's been doing that for 12 years now. He's a legal and financial consultant, did that for about 25 years. And he's a graduate of Abilene Christian University. Let's welcome Warren Starnes.
Good morning and afternoon. I'm very privileged to be here. All of us admire the work of Tesla and the others that have preceded us. Ed Skilling was a great admirer of Tesla and actually worked on a lot of the things that Tesla had started and learned a lot from him. He actually gave Tesla a lot of credit for the things that he started on in the field that he branched out into in electromedicine. There are a lot of great names in the past. Royal Rife is a big one. He pioneered the frequency technologies of the past. He did a great work in starting this cause in this direction. And Ed Skilling was commissioned by California cancer doctors in 1959. They had bought an original Rife instrument. In 1959, there was only about 3 of these in existence. Royal Rife had passed away, and the work had continued, and people had, since Rife was not around anymore, the schematics were in public domain, so anybody could get schematics for a Rife instrument and make one. And of course, as you're probably aware, a lot of people do, and there's a lot of them out there. Well, these California cancer doctors paid $30,000 for this original Rife instrument in 1959. Well, in 1959, $30,000, it's a lot today, but it'd be about the equivalent of about $300,000, $400,000 today. So they had this big investment, and they tried it. They're cancer doctors, so they tried it on some cancer patients. They didn't get any real noticeable changes or dramatic results, and so they were unwilling to just roll around on that investment, and so they literally left it in you. There we go. Thank you, sir. Yeah, Trine. Yeah. I'm glad that my sons are here, Trine and Trenton Starnes. They drove all night to get the Photon geniuses here, so it's admirable that they could pull that off. And after the conference, we can go up and show you how this works, demo it a little bit. As you can tell, there's a whole lot of frequency harmonic technology in this new Photon genius. But these California cancer doctors were unwilling to lose their investment, and so they really were smart guys, so they thought, well, this is the age of electronics. Why don't we just go get an electronics expert and have him take a look at this thing, because it was based on radio, which was all electron tube technology. So now we have transistors and advanced electronics. So they were based in California, and Ed Skilling was the senior electronics design engineer for General Dynamics. He had been for 17 years, the #1 electronics design engineer. I got a memo in his files early on, a dictate from management at General Dynamics, that if Ed Skilling didn't sign off on the schematics, General Dynamics wouldn't build it. And it went out to all of their engineers, and they had over 1,000 electronics engineers. So that's how bright Ed Skilling was. Another interesting fact that occurred is along my development with Ed Skilling, I've also found out that here they're making guidance systems for missiles, and they're all bright electronics engineers. They have the brightest in the world. And Ed Skilling made the majority of their test equipment,
which is just amazing. He was just really, really far out in his electronics expertise. He took a look at this original Rife instrument, and in a couple of weeks he figured out what they were trying to do in the beginning and what they couldn't have known back then. And he went another direction. He realized that frequencies are important because that's how you measure energy. And he also realized there's a lot going on in energy besides just the number on the meter. So he went a broader spectrum in the harmonics field and developed new technology. And the very first instrument he made in 1959 got better results than anything in history, and he's been #1 in the world ever since. It doesn't mean anything negative about Rife because he gets credit for starting the majority of this. But if you have your health, your life at risk, you certainly need to go find the most advanced, the most sophisticated technology available that gets the best results. And Ed Skilling, of course, has been #1 in the world in now 41 countries. His latest development, which was released about 8 years ago, is the Photon Genie. It's recognized by some of the most advanced practitioners in the world and the most catastrophically ill people in the world as the #1 thing that produces noticeable results. The key word is noticeable. There's a lot of technologies that are documented to the nines, and that's great, but if you got chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, cancer, Lyme disease, you really want to be able to do something that you can notice some improvement. And the Photon Genie is now #1 in the world, and it is noticeable, and we have a demo out at the table in the atrium. That led us to the development of all of the technologies over these years. And, you know, my compliments to all of you for being at a conference like this, because it's so rare to find people of like mind and like spirit. And I've met a few of you, and some of you I've known for a while, and we have friends from different parts of the world here today. But it reminds me of a story that I heard from my father when I was younger about a mama skunk that had 2 little baby skunks. And she named one of them Out, and she named the other one In. Well, one day In got out, so she called Out in and said, "I want you to go out and find In and bring In." To her surprise, they come hopping down the trail, and she was just amazed. She called Out over and she said, "Out, how'd you know where to go to find In and bring In?" He said, "Instinct." It's great instincts that bring us together here. And you know, one of the things that we hear these days is think outside the box. Well, my question's always been, how'd you get in the box? You know, when you're born into this world with an onboard computer by our glorious Creator, and we now know technically you only use about 6% of it, how did we get so limited? One of the other statistics that I became aware of is that the average child hears the word no 40,000 times by the time they're 6 years old. It's no wonder we become a rebellious society. It's no wonder we have a problem with people telling us no. And it's no wonder that it's so limited for us to think anything different than what we were forced to believe all of our first years. As it relates to what we deal with primarily cancer and a lot of serious ailments, you know, we have a very limited view because we have very limited experience. And if we look to our elders, if we look to our parents, I remember so many times as a kid getting sick, getting the flu, and going to the doctor, and to come home and ask my dad, "Dad, why do I have to take this stuff? Why do I have to do what he says?" "Son, just do what the doctor says." I went to my family doctor when I had the flu one time, and it was a very memorable experience. I was about 12 years old. And I'm just sick as a dog, and I'll do anything to get over this. And I said, Dr. Oliver, please, give me something to make this go away. So he writes me a prescription, and he hands it to me. He said, now, Warren, you take that, and if that doesn't do it, I'll give you something else. Well, I'm 12 years old, and I'm saying, well, Dr. Oliver, why don't you just go ahead and give me what you're going to give me next? Why? If there's a chance this isn't going to work, why don't we just go ahead and start with the more advanced formula? And so you have these experiences, and I'm sure you've all had similar experiences where you think, there's got to be more information than this. There's got to be more help than this. There's got to be more resources. And can anybody just help me understand what I'm dealing with? The answer is no, and I hate to be the one to tell you the next no. But the problem, of course, with catastrophic illness, things like cancer is, when you go to the doctor for advice, that's what you're going to get, advice, which is what we call opinions. Now, he's an educated opinion. He's got plaques on the wall that tell you how smart he is and how many years he went through school and how much his parents paid to put him through school and how dedicated he is to trying to make a living and pay all that debt back. But what he's telling you, he's going right down the hall and telling the next person in the next room. And they have to. It's nothing malicious. It's nothing that's just driven by money. It's just the way that it is. When you're dealing with those kind of circumstances and it gets really serious and you're the one that gets the death sentence of you've got 6 months to live, you got 3 months, you got a period of time. Someone called me one day, said, and she was crying. I said, listen, calm down, dear. We can sort this out. I said, what happened? She said, well, my doctor says I have 6 months to live. Well, I said, you're luckier than me because nobody ever gave me 6 months. You got 6 months more than I do. I'd go out here and have a car wreck today. There is a positive way of looking at these things, but when you deal with the reality of these experiences and you have something that's life-threatening to you, we believe that you should make a major shift in how you think about a lot of these normal things that you have to do. I personally believe if you go to a doctor that doesn't have the same kind of cancer or worse than you, it's going to be real hard to get the kind of advice you need. Why? Because he doesn't have it. By the way, if he had it, he might be doing things different than he's advising you to do. How do we know? Well, over the last 12 years, I've had a few phone calls from some medical doctors and all doctors in every field. Because we all are human and no one's exempt. No money, no education, no life experience, no smarts. Some of the smartest people in history died of cancer. Let me see the hands of all of you who know someone that's had cancer or have had some dealing with and experience with it. Man, that's, that's how prevalent it is. For anyone these days to think that they may not get it is what they used to tell me I was doing in school, daydreaming. I'm thinking about something that didn't have anything to do with what's going on, and I'm believing it. Well, when you go to practitioners that don't have experience with their life at stake, as you are now trying to gain experience with your life at stake, it is what has favorably been referred to in the past as the blind leading the blind. I believe any one of you who got a diagnosis would agree with me, because I've had the diagnosis, that it's a jungle out there, and I'm lost. I don't know which way to go. What do you do, and what do I do next? And by the way, forget next, what do I do now? Everybody's talking, well, if this doesn't work for you, try this protocol. And you drink this tea, and then you take this, and go to the health food store, and they might tell you something. Listen, I learned earlier about going to the health food store. That's my favorite place to eat. They have the best things in the world. It's the only kind of control of substances we're exposed to as far as what we eat and dietarily. But every time I've gone to the health food store, and over the years it's increased, I would ask, what's good for this? And they say, well, we've got this thing right down here. Well, right now, these days, when you say, what's good for this disease or this diagnosis, what's good for candida? Man, you got a whole aisle as long as a grocery store. Well, you know, when I had serious things, I bought everything that was supposed to be good for it. So now I've got a garage, the 3-car garage, you can't get anything in there because they're like racks in a health food store. I have bought everything, tried everything, and that's what you got to do. But what you're doing is trying to guess your way out of this jungle, and it's deadly. I personally believe that, you know, if you realize that being diagnosed with something serious is like being lost in the jungle, you can get your list of all the survival gear you need for that part of the jungle you're in. People can bring it, they can fly it in, they can airdrop it to you, and you're just going to die in the jungle with all that stuff laying around you. Because if you don't have somebody to guide you out of there, you're lost. You can't fix lost. It's like that comedian that says you can't fix stupid. There are just some things you ain't going to fix because you're smart or you want to or you don't like it. So, literally what we try to do is be guides in our efforts, not just with technology. The fringe benefit that's developed for the Skilling Institute is because practitioners worldwide recommend the skilling technology as kind of a last resort. And I always tell people the same thing. Somebody calls me and says, well, you know, I bought a rifle instrument. I say, you keep using it. Have you noticed any results? Well, no, it's not getting me where I want to go. It helped a little bit in the beginning. I said, well, keep using it. Anything that helps a little anytime helps. Keep using it. But you need to add some more power. You need to add some more muscle. You need to sophisticate your treatments. And I have said point blank, I mean it. Even a bad old rifle instrument's better than chemo, surgery, or radiation. The medical field does not have very good results in anything except car accidents and trauma. I tell you, I'm in a car accident. I want the best surgeon in town. I want the best trauma center. I want the best drugs. I don't want to be feeling any of this. But as soon as I start to get a little better, please take me by the health food store on the way home, because that's how you got to take care of health, is at health resources, health stores, health doctors. There's so many great alternative doctors now. We're glad to have some of them associated with us. Dr. Mary Ackerley in Tucson, Arizona. Alex Castor is one of the best diagnosticians in the world. She's a psychiatrist. She's top of her class in Harvard. She's just been appointed by the governor to the Board of Health in Arizona. And these kind of doctors, Dr. Hale Aldrin, who's one of the best medical doctors, he's the only medical doctor that I found that is a brainiac. Now, they've nicknamed him that. In medicine, he's a medical doctor. And he's a naturopath licensed in Arizona. And he's a genius at that. I was diagnosed with bladder, prostate, and urethra cancer, and they gave me 6 months to live. How I found out is I went to a medical doctor because I'd been feeling bad for a couple of years. I thought, you know, maybe it's time I take a look at my blood. And the doctor that did the blood work called me and says, you need to come in and talk to me. I said, well, tell me what my PSA was. No, I need to talk to you. I said, no, you need to tell me what my PSA was. I can't tell you. This is Warren. We've been friends for years. You know it's me. No, I need to talk to you. I just couldn't believe it. And God go all the way back to this doctor's office. And they called me in and sit down and said, I'm going to have to refer you to someone else. I said, my breath's not bad, is it? What's wrong here? No, we've never seen a PSA this high. And I nearly had a heart attack. It was 94. Well, any of you guys know about PSA, it's supposed to be 0. And we've had people die with 2.5, 11, 7, 17. Die. So, and I have all this experience, and I'm sitting here now, I am like the people I've been consulting all these years. So I asked this doctor, who's the best in the world that you know of? Who's the best close to where we are? She said, well, you're not going to be able to see this guy because, he's just too busy, and he consults other doctors, and he's real hard to get a hold of, and, you'd have to wait too many weeks to get an appointment. I said, what is his name, please, and what is his number? I engineered a time to meet with him, and it was Dr. Hale Aldrin. I learned more in 3 hours of my first consult with him. He charged $300 an hour, and I'm going to tell you, it was cheap, because everything I learned in those first 3 hours, I have used for the last 4 or 5 years to help save the lives of many people with cancer. We formed an alliance, and now he helps consult with us, patients and doctors who call in about the Photon Genie and the Ed Skilling technology that have all these bad catastrophic diagnoses. We don't treat them. We don't even try to do. That's what doctors do. But if you're lost in the jungle and you can get a cell signal and get me on there, I can tell you what berry to eat, what bark to use, what water to drink, and which direction to go. You still have to take one step after another to get your way out. And we'll address that in a minute. But on this path, I worked with all of these doctors in all of these countries. So all the ones that I had notes in my computer that had experience with cancer, of course, I called them all. I went to several other countries. I got a formula from a shaman out of Chile. I got a formula from a medicine man in the mountains of Northern California that was known as a ghost. I really, really, really worked hard to try to save my life. The first 3 months, I was doing research day and night. And guess what I figured out? It really doesn't do anything. Matter of fact, over this period of time, I now know what protocols are for me to deal with the physical problem, and I know what they mean to the problem you're dealing with. It's kind of like if cancer could talk. Well, I can tell you what it would say, because I've had many conversations, and I've had some that were good and some that were horrible. But I know exactly how it acts, how it reacts to a whole world of substances. And we have learned that one of the primary fuels for cancer, most doctors believe it's sugar. I'll tell you about what percent of people that I have known that had cancer, and it's in the hundreds. I'll tell you what percent of people that completely quit sugar and how well it worked. They died. Sugar is not it. By the way, there is no it. That's a big problem too. But one of the primary fuels that cancer thrives on, this is one of its primary foods. This really helps make it grow. It makes it worse. It makes it spread. It's research. Hey, I got my books here, and I'm on the internet, and I'm thinking, oh man, isn't that interesting? Look at all these facts about prostate cancer, and it's endless. You go on the internet, you can read. You ain't lived long enough to read it all, even if you don't have cancer. But every bloody second you're doing that, cancer is just simply multiplying and taking territory. That's all it does. One of the other things we've learned is cancer loves it when you're thinking. It just loves it when you're thinking, because it doesn't have to. All the pathogens, Candida loves it when you're thinking. You don't need to think, just multiply. So anytime you think, you can think your way out of these problems, you're going to be sadly disappointed. And, early on in business, we learned, I worked with W. Clement Stone for my first years out of college, which was a blessing, Napoleon Hill, Andrew Carnegie's work, and it was a great influence for my life. And one of the things that we learned from W. Clement Stone is, look, there's nothing wrong with mistakes. The only time a mistake turns wrong is when you don't learn from it. How did you learn to walk in this building? Well, I can tell you how you learn. Busting your butt a gazillion times in diapers. How'd you learn to run? How did I learn to run track? Busting my butt in diapers a gazillion times. They don't even have all pictures of all the bruises and the breaks and the scrapes that you had when you learned how to walk. And you know what? When you fell down, you didn't get up and say, I'm such an idiot. I just can't believe I can't be walking. It's a bad habit we learn because it's almost like if we can talk about this problem, we don't have to go solve it or do anything about it. There's two kinds of mistakes that we can learn from. Our own mistakes, which is primary. There's nothing wrong with trying a protocol, but if it doesn't work, quit. If it provides some benefit, yeah, maybe, but don't be just doing things that don't work. How hard is this to figure out? You can't do it in business. I've noticed two things, too. The things that we do in business are pretty efficient. You wouldn't have a board meeting about something and know that the statistics are bad for doing it without everybody just voting, I ain't voting for it. We're not doing it. The other kind of mistakes that you learn from are the mistakes of others. Well, that's the preferred mistake to be learning from. Well, after making my mistakes, I actually learned more about mistakes that I should avoid by sitting in doctor's office with other patients. Because what are you here for? What did you try? How long you been doing this? What are they doing for you? Is it working for you? Well, you just have to be a quick study, not at research, but a quick study at mistakes. The other element that we deal with are what we call in business the odds. Well, they've made odds on everything. You can go to Las Vegas and see it. They have whole rooms of boards up there with odds made on everything. Things you don't even know anybody's paying attention to. They got odds on them and people are betting on them. Early on in my wasted time of research, I did glean a few little gems that were real important because they do have some facts out there. Doctors have opinions, but research is research, facts are facts, results are results, and odds are what they are. On the American Cancer Society website, I was looking at all these statistics, and they got them a gazillion of them. Most of them don't mean much to you if you had it. So I'm looking through there, and all of a sudden I hit this little statistic, and it's long-term survival rate. So I'm kind of into short-term survival right now, but I'm future thinking. I'd like to have a long-term survival. I got to make this first 6 months. But then I'm going to be thinking about 7, 8, 9, 10, and maybe a year or 2 years. The long-term survival rate of cancer patients in the United States is 3%. Now, you would say, well, a friend of mine had cancer, and they said if you took this treatment, there's a 60% chance of going into remission. Well, let's go back to the boardroom. You come up with any treatment, any concept, any protocol, any idea, and you come before the board and you're going to present your idea. And you're going to tell us that there's a 60% chance of this business venture working. The board would say, oh, so you're telling us there's a 40% chance we can lose our money? Get out of here. Why are you wasting our time? But we sit in a doctor's office and a remission. Let's talk to cancer again. What would cancer say about these statistics? Well, if it could laugh, and I think it does in its own way, it would never stop laughing at this deal. You know, remission to us means, whoo, ha, ha, hey, I beat it. And they get on TV and they, hey, I beat, hey, and the audience is cheering, there's remission. Oh, what a fighter. What a survivor. You know what I say? What a punk. What an idiot. Can you believe this? You believe remission means something? I'll tell you what it means to cancer. Permission. Next time you hear remission, you understand what cancer's saying. Permission. All head full. Multiply, take territory. We sit in the doctor's office and says, you know, there's a 70% chance you can go in remission with this treatment. And we say, gosh, doc, that sounds good. Well, cancer's affected your ears. Cancer's robbed you of your hearing, and it's totally interfered with any kind of sense or logic. And it only proves not that you're not smart, it just proves that you're super scared. Well, I personally have learned from experience, the time you need to think the clearest is when you're scared the most. And you can't be lollygagging around buying into something that has bad odds if your life is at stake. I promise you, if there was a 40% chance of dying from bungee jumping, no one would do it. You'd have a few, and then you'd see the ones that didn't and see a bloody mess at the bottom of the canyon, and they just outlaw it. But not only have they not outlawed, they have the law on their side. They are literally legally licensed to make these deals for you, and they make you feel bad if you don't go for it. Well, you know what happens in the boardroom? Cry outside, please. Leave the room. Next. We need a better proposal. We want to be smart with our money. We're smarter there with our money than we are with our life. One of the things that we also learned along the way is that practitioners in general do care. They do want you to have a good experience. They want you to beat this. They want the treatment to work. It's just like having a car full of buddies and them wanting you to buy that lottery ticket. And they want you to win, but it's your dollar, and if you do win, they want to split it because they were there. That's human. These things are okay in any field except your health, your life, and dying from these kind of thought processes. One of the things that we experienced with practitioners is that we had many calls, not as many as just patients, but we had many calls from doctors, mostly medical doctors, a lot of alternative doctors, homeopaths, massage therapists, colon therapists. They all recommend the skilling technology, but a lot of the calls we got, especially if it was from a medical doctor, it's not likely that you would think those guys would be calling. And when you talk to them for a while and say, well, why are you interested in this technology? Why are you interested in the photon gene? Well, my wife has breast cancer. I said, well, what have you done for her so far? Well, I was considering this. We're considering surgery, of course, and we're considering radiation. But I just don't want to see my wife go through what my patients go through. They were at least honest. And by the way, they think the same way you do because they see it. When you get a diagnosis, you're in the lobby and ain't nobody complaining. Everybody's just scared to death and hoping too. So you don't see the results of people that go through these medical procedures and these treatments. I unfortunately had the experience over my business career, consulting for 25 years, of having clients who either personally or some family member got cancer. That's how I got on to this early on, where we would refer them to Sweden, Switzerland, Germany, Mexico, alternative clinics, because we already knew what happens if you go medical, drugs, and literally, if you think about it, practitioners are just as human as you. And if you saw what happened to that many people that had surgery, you might not feel as positive about surgery as you try to feel because you're scared. If you saw what happens to people from chemo and radiation, it would really scare you. It would scare you worse than cancer. I promise you. I had to stand by the side of the bed of a couple of buddies early in my career and them begging me to shoot them. So when I had my first diagnosis, I knew surgery was out. I knew chemo and radiation were out. Dying ain't as bad as those three things. It's really not. By the way, since we do have all this experience with this crud, this pathogen, I fortunately met Tullio Simoncini. He's worthy of noting. He wrote the book, Cancer is a Fungus. He's one of the first guys that's identified it for other than something just unknown and scary. He was the top of his class out of medical school. He was bright. He was a gifted surgeon. He was like, they call him like lightning surgically. He was just precision, and he was raised in northern Italy, an Italian fiery spirit, but he's really smart and he's really skilled. And he won the prestigious award of being able to treat the cardinals of the Roman Church right out of medical school. It was rare. And the cardinals of the Roman Catholic Church are more powerful than the government in Italy. That's kind of the way it is. So if someone said they were proud that they treated the President of the United States, okay, whoopee-doo. But if somebody gets to treat the cardinals of the Roman Catholic, their screening process is a lot more intense. 6 months into this, he quits. Well, everybody said, "You crazy? What?" And I asked him, I said, "Man, what happened?" He said, "I couldn't do it anymore." I said, "You only did it 6 months. What do you mean anymore?" He said, "I couldn't stand it. It doesn't work. I ain't doing it anymore." He knew that surgery didn't work on cancer. He knew that chemo and radiation didn't work on surgery, and he was not going to participate in it anymore. I said, "Well, nice to meet you. Hallelujah, warrior." He's not a doctor. He's not a surgeon. He's a warrior. He goes against the whole community for what's right. He spent years still working as a medical doctor and trying to figure out why it didn't work. And he found out that every time he operated and got in surgically in the human body, no matter where he went, no matter what kind of cancer it was, what kind of species name was on it, it was always white. He said unless there was blood involved or in the colon or whatever, stained from something, it was always white. And he realized that's fungus. Well, what's an antifungal? He tried to think of something that was non-toxic, because toxic stuff, you know, saying you're going to help the body and then hurt it, think about this. We're going to help you, but we're going to do something that's going to hurt you. Where is the sin? My granddaddy told me when I was 10 years old, he said, "Sonny boy, the price of common sense goes up every day. That's a business you better be in." Nothing's changed about that. The only thing lacking in the health field and in business even, in every field, is common sense. If it doesn't make sense, you really shouldn't be doing anything until you find something that does make sense, or try to make more sense out of it. He took sodium bicarbonate, baking soda, not the baking soda like you have in the refrigerator or whatever, but it's pharmaceutical grade sodium bicarbonate. Liquid, clear liquid. And he would surgically operate on these people, and he'd leave a catheter in there, and he'd just irrigate that with, and he'd arthroscopically put a little camera in there and watch what's happening. He's got videos. You can go on this website and look it up. Well, after everything didn't work for me, I went to Rome, Italy, and I mean, the stories are horrible of what doctors did to me or tried to do to me, nearly killed me, didn't work, false hope, wasted money. My last attempt was a night train to Italy. Our financial administrator is part of the reason why we do as well as we do. Jamie Fascinello is here. And she went with me on that trip because I was helpless. I mean, I'm dying. I had 6 months to live, and I'm 4 months into it. I have like a torch at my butt. I did a flight from Phoenix, Arizona to Philadelphia to connect with Rome, and I was in the center seat. And I had to get up 9 times to go to the bathroom. You realize how embarrassing that is? How hard it is? Oh, brother. And then you run into these guys that give you all these bad odds and wonder why you're not doing it, make you feel bad about you not doing their procedure. Tullio installed 2 catheters in the arteries in my leg. I still have one. One went south, went bad, had to have it removed. Still got one in there. And we irrigated the little veins to the prostate are real teeny, and it's an encapsulated organ, which makes it really, really extremely difficult. Prostate is to men what breast cancer is to women. Very difficult because it's not what I call on the main highway, so you can't just put something in your vein or eat some, go through it and kill it or whatever, and we have access to those kind of technologies, but there are just a few that are just tougher to get to. So they park this catheter near this little vein here on each side, and you pump 500 mils of sodium bicarb every day through these catheters to flood the area. And it works on a good % of people. It did not work for me. I did that 3 times, 8 days, 500 mils. 4-day break, 8 days, 500 mils. 4-day break, 8 days, 500 mils. And then you go get an MRI. And by the way, these guys don't go by, let me see how you're doing. Let me muscle test you. Excuse me, how about a picture of where it's at? Well, I go get an MRI, and it just didn't work. The cancer cells had invaded one of those little veins on one side, and it just wasn't enough concentration to flood the area and be as effective as it would if I'd have caught it early. I came back from Italy, and he promised me that he would try to do something for me because we became friends. I went around, helped him work with patients and everything because we had a lot of experience doing things alternatively, and became a really good buddy. He's just such a great guy and very bright, and his book is accurate. Well, he promised me he'd go talk to one of his buddy surgeons and see if they would park a catheter in the pelvic region where they could irrigate the whole area because they could already see cancer cells out in the tissue outside the capsule, which is, oops, that's scary. And the lymph glands are right there. Your bone thing is going on real close, so it's just really, really, really one of those bad situations. He made 5 trips to 5 surgeons, friends of his, the best surgeons in Italy that he knew. Every single one of them refused to do it unless they would remove the prostate. If you do any research at all, you're going to find out removing it doesn't do any good at all. I mean, yeah, okay, you got this chunk out of the way, now all this is just going nuts anyway. And it makes it mad. The thing about cancer is there's 2 things that you're licensed to do in the U.S., and only 2, a procedure or a prescription. Neither one of those work on cancer. Now, they can give you statistics about they cut this tumor out and they ain't seen anything since. But 1 million cancer cells can occupy the space of a pinhead. 1 million. You know how many cancer cells you need to have cancer? And 1 million you can't see on a scan, and you're going to go by the picture to find out whether you got it or not, or got rid of it or not? Common sense. It ain't going to happen. It operates through your blood. It circulates through the body through your blood. Germans began looking at blood cells 50 years ago using powerful microscopes. They were just identifying everything in the blood. Identifying every kind of cell in the blood. Well, they identified cancer cells in the blood. The interesting thing was they identified cancer cells in blood of people that weren't diagnosed with it for 2 to 5 years. Statistics indicate the average person has cancer 6 to 8 times in their lifetime. They never even knew they had it. Why? Because the immune system gets rid of it. The quote by Ed Skilling on his website is a quote that will be there forever, and it's something you should etch into your memory and write down on your paper, because the only known cure for cancer and any pathogenic disease is your own God-given immune system. All Ed Skilling did is figured out how to communicate with it and power it up. It's your immune system that does it. So, oh, well, you can broadcast this frequency, whether, excuse me, the body's made resistant. That's the big problem. That's why it helps a little, because your skin's your largest organ, and indirectly you can change some things and affect some things, good or bad. But in Arizona, where we're from, you lay out in the 105-degree sun, you can bubble your whole body, 3rd-degree burn your body. You're in intensive care. But the doctor has some good news for you. Your brain's okay, your heart's okay, your liver's okay, your kidneys are okay, your pancreas is okay. How could that be? Does that mean the sun isn't powerful? Just burns you. God made us resistant, so things flying around the universe, ultraviolet, microwave, EMFs, hey, bring them on. Your body is made to protect you from that. Yeah, you get too much, too long, you can hurt yourself doing almost anything too much, too long. But God blessed you by making you resistant. It took Ed Skilling 40 years in a collaboration with Valerie Hunt, UCLA Emeritus, to come up with a circuitry that would work in harmony with the impedance of the body, which is the electronics term for resistance. That's why you use everything else. If that doesn't get you there, and I by all means try, then you got to get a Skilling instrument, because that's the only thing that gets you further, better, longer, because it's made in harmony with the way God made your body. And Ed Skilling's the only one so far that I've met that gave God the credit, which ought to tell you something about his character. But when you're dealing with these cancer situations, these pathogens in the body, there's 2 criteria. Since it's your immune system that controls and actually wins this battle, by the way, let's just stop right here just for a minute, because most doctors would tell you that cancer is a disease and you need a treatment. We have found, and in our experienced opinion, and this is going right on the title page of this book I'm trying to get out by the end of the year, cancer is not a disease you treat, it's an enemy you beat. I'll guarantee you, if you're sitting in a doctor's office, he's recommending something for you, and you're approaching this like terrorism, you wouldn't be signing up for some stupid treatment that messed you up and didn't do anything. There's 2 criteria you need for any protocol dealing with candida or fungus or cancer or Lyme disease. Lyme disease is one of the most misdiagnosed diseases on the planet. They call it chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, stress, mental, emotional, psychological. They prescribe all this crud for it. Lyme. And it's a critter. It can operate, transport soft tissue organs to your body. Photon genie is the only thing that's known consistently to permanently get people under control with this, but they have to do several other things at the same time, like you do with anything involving the complex human body. There's 2 criteria that you need to have for evaluating a protocol, including these, including that big honker over there, which is the Photon genie the size of a truck with advanced technology piggybacked with infrared. The average infrared sauna has 2, 4, 6, 8 emitters in it, and it's in a wooden box. I found out in my research early on, wood absorbs infrared. Why am I sitting in a box that's eating it before I get it? That's like going to dinner with a big person and let them eat first. You may go hungry. You go, there's a diet for you. Hey, the two criteria, since you know it's an enemy, not a disease, is number one, it has to hurt the enemy. Let's just stop right there for a minute. I can't be drinking Easy-Act tea and say, well, you know, people do this and it makes them feel better. Okay. I do a lot of things just because it makes me feel better, but I'm kind of busy fighting this enemy right now. I'm trying to beat this 6 months thing. So, number one, it has to affect the enemy. Here's your effects. Kill it, torture it, torment it, starve it, get rid of it, reduce it, eliminate it. There's a few others you can throw in there. But now you got, your first criteria for any recommended protocol is, does this create an unfriendly environment for this terrorist? The closest word to cancer, to help you understand it better than any doctors in this town, anywhere you go, and any patients you run into that are just hoping they get lucky by accident and win this battle by accident and get lucky and get that 70% works for them until it gets worse and comes back later. Your criteria is, does this create an unfriendly environment for this enemy? Does it torture it, hurt it, kill it, starve it, punish it? The closest word for cancer is terrorism. If you want to know how to beat cancer, study what they're doing about terrorism. They're hunting these chumps down, and they keep hunting them down. One of the best things George Bush ever did is just start hunting them down. Hey, they're going to kill all of us if they don't. What, we're not believing what these guys say? Hey, you can't believe what anything an enemy says except when they tell you they're going to kill you. You better be believing that. So you have to be aggressive about hunting them down, torturing them, creating an unfriendly environment. Terrorism also is involved in security. One of the weakest, and nothing personal to anybody, but because I did the same thing. But when you are raised in a country like America, and you're told all your life to just do what the doctor says, you're not even supposed to question them. And if you don't do what they say, they might not treat you anymore. Like you might not have any more of that help. You should be so lucky. If they're going to do something to you, it ain't going to work, or they got something better and they ain't going to give it to you first, I don't know what this kind of person you need to be dealing with to do business, especially about life business. But when you go to the doctor, you are going to a doctor. Why? Because that's what you're supposed to do. Well, that's a box they stuck you in, and you got in it, and you're the one by choice or staying in it, so you don't have to think out of the box. You just have to walk out the door. You just leave a doctor alone. I asked Tullio Simoncini, I said, hey, give me some voice of experience. If you had a catastrophic illness, if you had stage 4 cancer, if you had inoperable cancer like I do, if you had stage 4 cancer, what's the best advice you could give somebody? Before I could say another word, don't go to doctors. How could they know enough about it to save you? When 97% of cancer patients don't make it, every doctor, all the medical profession admitted they've lost the war on cancer because they never approached it like a war. They're doing it like a treatment. So you go to a doctor for a treatment with your body that is so complex, so compact. There are multiple organs, there's multiple systems, and they're all involved in this catastrophe. They all have allowed this to start, occur, and continue. and you want a doctor for a treatment and think you're going to get lucky, leave the boardroom, please. That's a bad proposal. The body is so complex, it's so marvelous, it's so wonderful, and it is so powerful that we just daydream along saying, I'll be fine. Well, why would someone think that, knowing all the statistics that all of us have had experiences with it, and all of us are candidates for it? All of us are born with precancerous cells, and it's just a matter of time until some fire up and the race is on, the war has begun. And if your immune system in that peak optimum level, you're not powering it up every day, you're not moving and balancing the fluids, you're not moving and balancing the lymph system, you're not charging and balancing your cells, you're not reflowing the nerve paths of the body, good luck. You ain't gonna make it. Cancer will probably get you anyway. That's how bad terrorism is. The body's so complex that you cannot, in your wildest daydream, imagine a doctor and a treatment being the good defense against terrorism. Oh, so we're going to secure our borders against terrorists, and you're not going to do it with your body? Common sense. Oh, we'll build a wall down here in Mexico. Canada's okay. They're asleep up there. I don't think so. I think these terrorists are smart enough to figure out where any loose port is. We are protecting our borders. We're protecting our ports. They're checking bags. I nearly missed my flight because this girl wanted to play with all of my toys. I'm running to the plane. I remember when I used to run to the plane and just run on it. Just throw the boarding pass on the desk as I ran down the ramp. That'll never happen again because of terrorism. You should be thinking like that right now. Now that you understand more about cancer than most people do, you need to start protecting some borders here. You need to get aggressive about security. You need to do two things. Do things that create an unfriendly environment for pathogens in the body. And do anything that works. I don't care. But if it doesn't work, you now know where to go to get something that will. And this little honker right over here is the biggest development in electromedicine history. You got to aggressively do things that make it difficult for this enemy. The other thing you got to do is you got to develop a battle plan for security. You need to secure all the borders. The number one border you got to secure is your blood, because they now know that cancer develops its own little blood system. It'll develop its own little veins and stuff. And it extracts from your blood its favorite food. You say, well, I quit eating cancer, so I should be fine. I don't think so. Your body makes sugar out of everything else you eat to make the rest of your body work. Cancer's going to get it. It's going to get its sugar. Yeah, you certainly don't want to be feeding the enemy. You want to starve it out. But don't think that's the only thing you've got to do to beat this opponent. You really need to do things that detoxify and cleanse the blood, which brings us to the latest development by Ed Skilling. I was in his lab about 4 years after working with him, and he was on this phone call. He put all the phone calls on speakerphone. And this nice lady, pleasant doctor was on the phone, and they had a little conversation. I was working on a circuitry and just kind of listening in a little bit. And somewhere in the conversation, he said, "You still got that big something doodah box?" I didn't pay a lot of attention. She says, "Oh, yes, I still have it." He said, "Well, how's it working? Is it still working?" "Oh, yeah, I'm still batting 1,000. Well, listen, I've been working with Ed Skilling 6, 8, 10 hours a day for 4 years. I never heard 100%. I never heard batting anything. So after this conversation, I said, hey, who was that? This doctor in California, and he'd known her for 20 plus years. And I said, well, what was this box thing you were talking about? Well, that was a special instrument I made for one of her patients. I said, well, what did the patient have? They had a rare form of cancer. I said, well, what kind? They say. Well, he said it was really extremely rare. There was a young lady in her early 20s, and she had tumors on every square inch of her body, top of her head, bottom of her feet. I said, oh, man. I never heard any. I heard some bad ones, but I ain't heard anything like that. He said it was extremely rare. So he made this box of tube technology because he's a master at inert gases. Krypton, xenon, argon, neon. And he tested all these gases and fired the plasma in these tubes and had sophisticated electronics ways of measuring the harmonics that came off, because he knew that's what the body responded to. It's how your body energetically communicates. It's not a number on a meter. And it had about 14 feet of tube in it, metal back, so it could reflect the harmonics off. And I said, well, man, how come we're not making that? He said, well, we've gone off in this other direction that's more body friendly, and it does more things. It reflows the nerve paths. It does all these other great things that changes catastrophically ill people. I said, yeah, but man, we get some people that are just, it's too late. I mean, they use the genie, they do better. It makes them live a year, 6 months, 2 years longer, or whatever. But it's just, I said, we need some muscle here, man. We need some big weapons. He said, well, we could do that. I said, man, let's do this. He said, well, if you want to take the lead on it and everything, I'll kind of supervise and everything, and we'll stay on this field. You just kind of do that on the side. So I started working on it. And then 4 years ago, I get a diagnosis of prostate, bladder, and urethra, and I'm doing all this stuff, so I'm speeding this up. So I make a box, and I'm testing it, and I'm trying it. I had a stage 4 cancer patient that went into a coma from a drug they gave him they thought a bladder infection, medical accident. I think it's the 4th leading cause of death in America's medical accidents. So they put 2 genies on him. I quit what I was doing, drove over to hospice at the side of this hospital. I put my genie. I said, listen, if he comes out of the coma, you need to get him an ambulance, get him home, get him out of here. They're going to kill him if he stays in here any longer. They got him home. They bought 3 more genies, and they had 4 Photon genies on this kid. He had brain cancer when he was 17. They did 2 surgeries, chemo and radiation, made him into a vegetable. He had no feeling from his nose down, couldn't swallow, couldn't talk. They had to suction him every 15 or 20 minutes, 24 hours a day. They gave this family a choice. You can bring him home, take care of him in his last few days and weeks, or we can put him in full 100% 24-hour intensive care. This is a sweet family. They want to spend every minute. The genies kept him alive for a year and a half. He talked. He was able to get mobility. He was still ruined, but he was a precious soul that was somebody's son that they got to spend another year and a half with. Toward the end, they kept giving him these drugs for these different things because he's atrophied, because he can't move like we can. And he was in tremendous pain, and they started him on a morphine drip. I said, all right, time out. We can't let them do this, because that's going to kill him quicker than anything. Drugs do. So I took this box over, and his dad was kind of an engineering background. He rigged it up so he could run it down the rails on his bed. He was off the morphine drip in 48 hours. That kind of technology. That box had 14 feet of tube in it. That is 150 feet. When I came back from Italy and I knew I was going to die, just nothing was working. It was just too hard to get to this area. I made a prototype version of this that we were developing, and I put it under a bench in my bathroom, so I had my legs up on the bench, my butt's kind of up to it, and I got the tube technology, infrared, and the energy transmitters like on the Photon genie, and it took me about 3 weeks to work up the courage to do it. You say, well, what's so scary? It was my butt. That's what's scary. You know, I mean, everybody tells you things to do, but they, you know, for you to do it. And I asked Hale Owen, I said, hey, how much heat can the prostate take? How much heat can your business take? How much, you know, what? So I just rigged it up and got a towel, and the first night I did 20 minutes, the next night I did 30 minutes, the next night 40 minutes, and the fourth night 50 minutes. Well, after that fourth night, I had a crisis because it was so inflamed and tortured and swollen, I couldn't pee. And I walked all night just to barely pee before I thought I was going to explode. And I had my cell phone ready to go to the hospital and get a catheter. But by morning, and I'm walking all night and just kind of keeping it barely going, I started peeing a little bit. At the end of the next afternoon, I was actually feeling like pretty good. So I thought I'd made a mistake. I thought I really messed up and made it worse. By the way, anytime you hurt cancer, it's going to hurt you. You cannot kill something in your body without the rest of your body feeling it. How hard is this to figure out? It's a real problem when you're dealing with it, because every time you do something that works real good, it makes it hurt more. So you think, oh, I can't do that anymore. It hurts. I had a doctor that I demoed this on. He says, oh, I kind of got a headache, and I don't like a headache. And I said, man, come on. Can't you baby up? You got cancer. You're going to hurt a lot before this is through. And by the second day, I was peeing like a racehorse. Better than I did the whole time of all this diagnosis. So I waited a few days and revisited this and did it a few times and got rid of all my symptoms. One guy asked me not too long ago, he said, so you beat cancer? I said, man, it's like Obama coming on TV and trying to tell us they beat terrorism. You don't beat terrorism, and you don't beat cancer. You control it, you manage it, you warrior up, you outfight it, and you knock the punks off every time they show up. You got to know how to do it, and you got to have some weapons. This is the biggest weapon known in the world, just released, debuted at the anti-aging show in December in Las Vegas. And this is the first place they've been exhibited since the debut, and these are the first ones that are being shipped. Here's how this works. You have the Photon Genie energy transmission. You have the electron tube technology, harmonics, frequencies emitted from the tube technology. On the Genie, you've got two tubes. This thing's number one in the world, getting noticeable effect on catastrophic illness. And you got two tubes that are less than 2 feet, and you put them under your arms, around your neck, and you say, well, so if I get this big one, I don't need a little one. It's kind of like telling a Marine, you got a M16, get rid of that sidearm. You gotta be kidding. No good Marine's gonna get rid of any weapon. Only doctors and only patients would. You can't think like this and expect to compete in something as bad as internal terrorism. You're looking over your wall of your castle, and you see a little smoke off in the distance. And you know, where there's smoke, there's fire. Well, what would you do? You wouldn't send your whole army out there. You wouldn't maybe send any of you. You'd send some scouts out and identify the problem. But while they're out there identifying the problem, you have all your troops up on the walls. You fill the moat. You bring in some new alligators. You beef up. You warrior up. You get ready for what smoke indicates. Fire on the territory. Well, here's the wall you're looking over, only you're not looking out, you're looking in. And if you don't look at your body that way, and start to think, I got to find things that create unfriendly environment for pathogens, I got to find a way of powering up the troops. Well, that's what this does on a grand scale. It's infrared. In an infrared sauna, you may have 2468 emitters in there, wood's absorbing it. It still works. This has 72 emitters in it. And it's head to toe, 205 degrees around you. And let me tell you something, these punks can't escape. They can't just get in your blood and run off to another part of your body. Infrared penetrates 2 to 4 inches in the body. This energy transmissions to every cell. It penetrates in harmony with the impedance of the body. So you're just bathing yourselves in the thing you're the shortest of, which is cellular energy. And 30 to 40 minutes of standing in this when it's warmed up is the equivalent of 4 hours in a gym. It burns 700 calories. You'd have to go to the gym and pound yourself for 4, 5, 6 hours to burn 700 calories. And you can sit in a chair or wheelchair or on a bench or stand there for 30 to 40 minutes and do it every day. How many days would it take? Well, how big are you? How many terrorists have invaded your territory? How far down the hill are you? Guess what? Ain't any bigger muscle you can put on terrorism than this internally. You know, in the early days, back in Michelangelo's time, they were a little more primitive about how they ran the neighborhoods. Everybody lived kind of close together, and Michelangelo had this big chunk of a mountain, big chunk of granite, as tall as his room, set in his front yard of his house. It wasn't very long. They were like we are now till the neighbors were talking, and they really were complaining about, this thing obstructs the view. It's ugly. But this Michelangelo, he was famous. But just a matter of time, some of them worked up the nerve, and they got together in a group, and they went over. And they said, hey, Mike, we need to talk to you. You got to do something about this. It's obstructing the view of the scenery and nature, and it's ugly, and you need to do something about it. He said, well, gentlemen, that's how it appears. But there's an angel in it. Don't let any doctor tell you how bad or how sick you are. There's an angel in you. God blessed you with all the special forces you need to defeat any and all opponents. You just can't be stupid, lazy, or weak. And you can't be so scared that you do anything a chicken would do, which is not think about it enough and just react. Thank you for your time.